Glenn Loury here. This is the Glenn Show. We're the black guys at bloggingheads.tv. And where do you situate the American national project, if I can use those words? There's a huge military. There's massive economic interests that are global.
Absolutely.
There are all kinds of commitments in all kinds of places, including the Middle East, that have historical resonance and that entail the American. There's China. So you had the Cold War. Should we, in our enlightened position of humanism, be indifferent about how the outcome of the Cold War should have come? I mean, would we rather that the ideas and the spirit that animated the Soviet Union have had more sway and more influence throughout the world of peoples of color, or less? Do we believe that prosperity and the capacity to respond to the legitimate claims of the humanity of people? They need healthcare, they need food and housing. It doesn't fall from the sky. You're talking to an economist. I'm not going to wave a PhD, but I'm just going to say there's no free lunch. It doesn't come from nowhere. You need incentive, you need industry, you need investment, you need entrepreneurship, you need the forming of new organizations, you need creativity, you need human aspiration. You need human aspiration. We can belittle the profit motive if we want to, but I'm sorry to have to report as a historical matter, no more effective way of generating wealth has been identified. That experiment was run through the 20th century and the jury is in on that. Look again at China. So, you know, I don't think the line between the normative, what are our moral obligations in the condition of our imperfect humanity, and the prescriptive, what do we do, is a straight line. I will declare that I think the Americans prevailing over the Soviet Union in the Cold War was a good thing for humanity, for freedom, for possibility. I believe it was a good thing. Warts and all, I'm aware of every single wart. And I think it matters. I don't think we can sit this one out. I don't think we can afford to not, you know, you're a democratic socialist. Do I characterize you correctly?
Right. That's true.
So the issue of what's the marginal tax rate, I understand there's wealth inequality. When we get down to cases, the issue of the regulation, you made allusion to the climate problem indirectly just a moment ago in terms of the preservation of humanity. Real decisions have to be made that have massive multi-trillion dollar consequences way down the line. The framework of intellectuality that I bring to parsing the relative equities and becoming able to arrive at a decision matters. They're going to just call me a neoliberal economist because I want to bring the market into play, because I want to have a rational plan, because I realize that the way the price system communicates the information that people need to make efficient decisions is effective, and that's been proven by history. That's a position, it's debatable, but that's a position that I would stake out. So I don't want to ramble here. I'm asking you, who should be winning in the struggle of ideas? Is the American spirit project, the freedom idea, the market capitalism with warts, to be displaced by what? By socialism? By European style welfare state? I mean, you know,
anyway. I know Theo just want to jump in, and then I can't wait to get in. This is so rich. This is so rich. I'm telling you, this is good stuff. I'm gonna have to turn on my James Brown. Let's get this moment. Jump right in, though, Theo, and then I'm gonna respond.
Yeah, and I want to say this, Glenn, the Richmond speech that you shared with me, which I also shared with Glenn and with Cornel. In fact, Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong. There, you are in the process of unraveling something remarkable, which is an internal critique of the limitations of neoliberalism through the lens of revolutionary Christianity, which synthesizes the project directly with that of Cornel. There is a family resemblance between these two interventions. On the one hand, you develop a very carefully worked out analytic examination of the limitations of what I call economism, materialism, as a matter of fact, which you insist is so coextensive with the spiritual that capital is becoming mad in its obsession with economism, and in that it has to be limited with the discussion of the spiritual, of the religious. I call this Chekhovian, as a matter of fact.
let me. I know Cornel wants to get in response to something I've already said, but I got to. And thank you so much, Teodros. Thank you. Man, no, he read my essay, man. 2005, I was in Virginia somewhere, talked to some Christians because I'm still a Christian, on being a Christian and being an economist. Was the essay, and what I was saying, okay, so you got a kid. There's the candy bar. He can steal it. He doesn't steal it. Now, why doesn't he steal it? Is it because he did a calculation and he said the cost of stealing it, I might get caught, then it'll be trouble? Or is it because he said to himself, I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief and I don't steal. I say, you got parents and they got children to raise, and you can have a welfare bureaucrat trying to figure out the right incentives about what transfers to make and what not, and encourage them to be good parents. But what could replace them saying with conviction to themselves that they are God's stewards in the lives of their children, and they must care for them? Nothing can replace that. I was saying that the reliance upon economism, he calls it, this kind of, I want more, what do I do to get more thing, to the exclusion of the spiritually generated sense of meaning, the significance of life, which would then motivate people to act in various ways. Relying on incentives was really trivializing. There was a part of the human psyche that, the part of the human condition that in principle, incentive-based intervention could not reach. So it was like that. And yes, I related that to the experience to the situation of African-Americans in saying that some of these things that we have talked about in the nihilism conversation, part of this conversation, really could only be reached in this way, could only be reached through the spirit and through the sense of who one is. And yes, at that time I connected to Christianity, although I don't think the argument requires Christianity in order to be a critique of economism.
But I like that Christianity up in there, though. I appreciate that, though. But we, like Chekhov, we don't have to be Christians in order to be love warriors. But the thing is this, though. Let's just go back to
go back.
Let's go back to following Jesus into the temple and running out the money changers, the largest edifice east of Rome, protected by 400 Roman troops, with bankers on the inside and the intellectuals right next door, rationalizing the domination of the poor, and Jesus being willing to run these motherfuckers out. Now, what does that mean in terms of China and Russia and the United States? What it means is you refuse to accept any of the frameworks that lose sight of the preciousness of the least of these. Poor Muslims in China, right? China, repressive, regimenting, worthy of condemnation. Poor people in the United States, in Harlem. U.S. predatory capitalism is failing for them. Even after the communists leave, here come new gangsters with Putin in Russia. China will have new gangsters. So to follow the person who goes in and runs out the money changers is beyond ideology. It is a moral and spiritual practice that has political consequences. So this is where you and I have always overlapped, Brother Glenn, that you and I come from the same Sunday school context. You have been concerned with poor Black folk. You ain't never been obsessed with the Black bourgeoisie. You ain't never been obsessed with Martha's Vineyard. You ain't never been obsessed with status and position. You've been concerned with poor Black folk. You just got market-oriented solutions. And so the question becomes, the moral and spiritual dimension is to be in that temple, keeping track of those money changers or authoritarian elites or arrogant bureaucrats or condescending intellectuals, anybody who's downplaying the precious humanity of poor people, especially Black and working poor people or prisoners. Ain't no accident you spent so much time talking about mass incarceration at a time when it was not popular. You got Angela. Y'all ain't got a whole lot in common ideologically, but you got a lot in common morally. You concerned about these brothers and sisters catching hell on the underside of the American empire. That's what it is to follow Jesus into that temple. Now, once you then try to understand where the money changers come from, what's the history of, how do we understand the American empire vis-a-vis the Soviet empire? Both empires require certain kind of indictment, but there's no doubt that the American has certain liberties and freedoms that the Soviet empire didn't. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean the American empire is some massive success, and you acknowledge that too. It's been a failure for poor people. It's been a failure for the masses of Black people. That's what Garvey and the others understood. They just had their own responses to it. That's why I can overlap with some of them. Because they're concerned about the poor folk who are catching hell. They just got narrow Black nationalist responses to it that I'm highly critical of, because I'm not a nationalist for the most part of any sort. Every flag is under the cross for me. Every flag, no matter what. And what is that cross? Unapologetic, unconditional love, and unarmed truth. And what happens to unarmed truth and unconditional love in the world in which we live? Gets crucified. That's what the cross is all about.
I would say that being able to live without a flag is a luxury. I mean, let me put it this way. What are the solutions to take a poor community anyway? Los Angeles, Oakland, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore, Philadelphia. And you want a decent social safety net. You want investment in their future.
That's
You're not
right.
concerned about how much you're spending on that. You're interested in on their education. You're interested in their mental health as well as in their physical health.
Absolutely.
You want those children to have stimulation from the whatever. Okay.
That's right.
So you want a robust articulation of social commitment from the state.
Yes.
You need to mobilize billions upon billions of dollars. That can only happen when you tax people. Teodros is showing the book, which is the basis of our country. That can only happen when you tax people. Let me just make my point. You need the political community. There's no global welfare state. There may be in some millennial future that I cannot imagine, but I don't see a global welfare state. What I see is a community of nation states that have arrogated to themselves the power to levy on their citizens on behalf of collective projects, such as taking care of the poor. So if I'm serious about taking care of the poor, I need the nation state. What does that mean? I need my fellow citizens. It means I need some sense of shared fate and common purpose in order to actually achieve the humanitarian goal. So I don't understand.
I didn't say no flag. I just said that every flag is under the cross. That doesn't mean we have no flag. That the very concerns that I have of poor people as a radical Democrat is one in which those concerns came into the modern world in the shell of the nation state. And it remains in the shell of 193 nation states. And therefore nation states are indispensable, but in the end, inadequate, but indispensable context of following that Palestinian Jew in the temple running out money changers. Because it's a moral and a spiritual practice. It's not acting as if we have no flag. It's just every flag is to be measured, evaluated, judged in light of the cross. It's under the cross.
I got to ask you.